Video games are a form of art, a way to tell stories or convey narratives, and with the right tools and enough time, anyone can make a game. Games have evolved from simple board games and early computer experiments to the massive industry that we know today. From arcade hits like Pong in the 70s to the 3D graphics of the 90s, now immersive worlds of modern games. Technology has always pushed the boundaries of what's possible in gaming. But what if you only had 100 hours to make a game? The first 2 days of the challenge were the easiest yet the hardest days. I started with CodeHS's Unity game development course, thinking it would be the most structured learning method, but by the middle of day 2, I realized something. I was wasting my time. Each lesson took me about 30 to 45 minutes to complete, and each section saw me take about 2 to 3 hours. It was slow, and honestly, I wasn't retaining much, which for a challenge like this would not be the best course of action. So I decided to ditch the structured CodeHS lessons and went old school. YouTube tutorials. This choice would prove to be one of the best decisions of this entire challenge. Suddenly, I was learning how to script and design at a much faster pace, and it explained concepts way better than CodeHS did. By midday on day 3, I had my first real breakthrough. I had a cylinder that can move around with player input. Backtracking a bit, before I even started tutorials, I was brainstorming different game ideas. At first, I wanted to make a simple 2D platformer based off the Odyssey, with each stage having a different art style to match the different challenges Odysseus had to face to get back home. But then, silly Quilly happened. I was forced to switch to 3D, which meant going back to square one. My next idea was a hybrid with the same inspiration of Homer's Odyssey, where the character Odysseus had to switch from 2D to 3D to pass different levels. It was a cool concept, though I quickly realized it was going to be way too hard for a beginner. On day 2, Relance suggested making an RPG like The Legend of Zelda. I wasn't sold. I still wanted my 2D 3D platformer, but after learning about scripting and Unity, I realized that simple 3D RPG was actually my best bet for my skill level, and I could base it off the Lotus Eater Island. 3D game development. I found this tutorial. It was a 15-hour long guide on how to make a 3D RPG game. It was 15 hours, but it had everything I needed, so I went all in on it. The first section was movement. The guy explained you need a ground check, which is an invisible block on the bottom of your character, so the C# script knows that your character is actually on the ground and can move around. It also taught me how to set up my controls properly. His explanation was pretty good. Now, after 2 hours of debugging my own code, I finally got my character to move around and jump up and down. With movement done, I moved on to the aesthetics. Another hour of the tutorial, and I was learning how to make mountains, valleys, and even dirt roads. The things were looking good, until they weren't. The first problem was the grass models I downloaded. Though they were models, they just looked like PNGs glued to the ground. No 3D. Not exactly the immersive look I was going for. Problem 2. My trees looked fine from a distance, but the moment I got too close, boom. Purple trees. Sunday morning, less than 24 hours left in the 100-hour period, and the biggest of the disasters was yet to come. By now I had something, a full 3D map, even with the purple trees. It was 4 a.m., so I figured I'd get a few hours of sleep and let my laptop cool down, and check on everything in the morning. I wake up, open Unity, hit play, and... weird, maybe just a fluke. I'll try again. Okay, maybe third time. At this point, Unity crashed 3 times, and now, anytime I opened the editor, my laptop fan sounded like a jet engine. After 10 minutes, I'm pretty sure you could cook a steak on the bottom of the laptop. So with my laptop now turning into an oven, I had no choice. I had to abandon the 3D game. And against all instructions, I went back to the original idea I had, a 2D platformer based off Homer's Odyssey. After that 3D game disaster, I had no choice. I was back to 2D, so I found a tutorial that explained how 2D games work in Unity. About an hour of watching, I felt ready. By this time, I was going for a Geometry Dash style game where you jump across platforms and try to reach the final level, an island representing Ithaca. After a few hours of designing, I had my sprites, level blocks, and everything set up, but when it came time to script, I ran into a huge problem. Turns out that even though the tutorial was only a year old, my Unity had already changed how variables and script worked for 2D games. So for the next 4 hours, I was stuck debugging and getting nowhere. Then it hit me. It was already 5 p.m., just 14 hours left. If I was going to finish this, I needed help. That's when I remembered Unity had its own tutorials and a ton of free assets, so I mixed some of my own sprites with the pre-made ones for enemies, players, and backgrounds. Meanwhile, I focused on designing the level and textures myself. Not only that, but I made my own background music. By 11 p.m., my laptop was boiling, the keys were stinging when I touched them, and the bottom was so hot it left a mark on my desk. Then I made the mistake of opening one tab to check how to publish the game, and my computer crashed. It was no big deal, just had to restart. But when I rebooted my computer, everything was gone. Not a single project file, no saved work, nothing. It was like I had never even started. With 7 hours left, I had no choice. I had to redo everything from scratch. I pulled an all-nighter, recreating every part of the level, adding back every script and every texture, and by 7:16 a.m., with just under 30 minutes, I had finished. In 100 hours, I had learned how to game develop and made a game. A leap home was complete.